What's going on, everybody? Huge news roundup today. Jeff Kaplan had an extended interview with PC Games N discussing all manner of things Overwatch and where it's headed. And the Overwatch League finally has released the Doomfist skin celebrating the San Francisco Shock's victory, winning the Overwatch League last year. The skin is a rock and lava Doomfist Shock monster. There's a couple hidden references to the San Francisco Shock. The war paint on Doomfist's forehead look like a shockwave, and there's an emblem on his belt that is actually a decorative SF, which also can be seen when Doomfist uses his ultimate. If you're interested in getting the Doomfist lava monster skin, you may have to shell out to buy Overwatch League tokens if you don't have any left over, as that's the area that the other owl skins have gone. The most recent update on being able to farm tokens from watching the Overwatch League came from Jeff Kaplan when he appeared on Twitch stream for Echo's release, and at the time he said that they are working internally to get the tech to work out for YouTube, but also seemed to imply that in the current state of the world, it's difficult to work in a collaborative way, as you might imagine. To that degree, the Overwatch League has been canceled the past few weeks anyway, and is finally coming back for real this time, we think, this weekend for one heck of a global doubleheader, where the schedule is just jam-packed with 16 matches spread across the entire globe. In terms of time zones, obviously they'll be played online, but they have a lot of matches to catch up on. Moving on to general Overwatch news now, let's talk about Jeff Kaplan's interview. Well, really, he talked about everything under the sun for Overwatch. He talked about the difference in developing Overwatch originally years ago, where all the rules could be fluid and everything was subject to change, and how things are more set in stone now, at least in terms of the overall rule set, where something like 132 is unlikely to come. But at the same time, with the sequel coming out soon, they are looking to make radical changes once again. We've seen this somewhat with the balancing they've done, which Jeff alludes to. They're much more free in that regard, and not staying too precious to their design decisions anymore, which I think we're all very grateful for. But also in the sequel, we can see fundamental changes to anything. The article asks him about the monetization model with loot boxes, and is asked about the more popular Battlepass system that's in other games nowadays. And Jeff Kaplan does say that they are exploring different options that move them away from loot boxes, but it's more likely to come for Overwatch 2 than the core game, but he would never rule anything out. He does praise at least the gameplay aspects of a Battlepass system. Putting monetization aside, it's just a fun way to engage. He compares to the likes of their action RPG Diablo 3, where they have what's called Season Journey, which he says is in essence a battle pass, but just not monetized in any way. It's a bunch of cool content, things you should be doing in the game anyway, and if you do, you're going to be rewarded. It's an awesome system. As we've learned from over the years covering Overwatch, if Jeff Kaplan talks optimistically about a system or seems interested, it's very likely that they're either exactly trying that thing or something similar. With this being the case, we should expect some sort of gameplay incentive RPG mechanics come Overwatch 2. I mean, we've already known as much. Will be just the base point of the game, but there may be more added ways to systemize your gameplay with reward structures in the PvP gameplay as well. RPG mechanics in multiplayer games is nothing new. You could say that its first major success point was back in the Xbox 360 days with Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Call of Duty, a game that didn't have a ranked mode really until like 5 years after that point, I believe. Most people played just for the normal matchmaking and playing to unlock the different challenges, to get gun skins, and go through the progress of just unlocking aspects of the game. So to that degree, in terms of a system that works for engaging with the game, Jeff Kaplan seems to be interested. There are, of course, achievements in Overwatch. I don't pay any attention to them personally, and I think at least originally, over the years of the devs talking about this kind of thing, I believe that they were reluctant to put something such as a quest system in place, which of course Blizzard has in all their other games, Heroes of the Storm, for example, would have you queue up as a healer, maybe like 3 matches to get an unlock. It seems Overwatch didn't want to put that kind of thing in place, at least originally, because at the time it went against some of the core design principles. But now that we're well into the 2-2-2 role lock world, I think those types of reward systems would be good for the game, and I'll be interested to see what you guys think in the comment section down below. Jeff Kaplan talked about lots of other things that are relevant to Overwatch. The most pressing matter, I think, is hero pools, which he does say is going to need more data for us to make a real evaluation of what's going on, if it is a success or not. It's worked in the Overwatch League when they've been able to play. Jeff seems more optimistic to tweak it more for the ranked environment. These are some changes that he says they may consider. They're not coming yet, but the types of ideas that are on the table, perhaps changing the hero pools to daily instead of weekly. This would aim to help out the type of player that only mains a single hero so that they're not locked out of competitive play for an entire week. Of course, is, I think, major downsides to changing it daily. A week already feels kind of fast to me. I love the hero pool for this week, and I've actually barely had time to play on my main account. And I think even figuring out the meta takes a little bit, at least a couple days, before people are really comfortable with it. Our ability to adjust to hero pools may increase over time as we experience more of them, but at least for now, it seems to me, in my opinion, that players are really only getting a grip on what's going on after a few days of play, and by that point, there's only a few days left before it ends up changing again. Another possible change Jeff Kaplan says they may consider implementing is only applying hero pools to masters and above, because he says really that's the only place the meta exists. Everyone else is sort of just mimicking what the opinions and experience of the players at the top of the ladder. I've more or less agreed with this. I do see benefits to it being for everyone. And actually, based upon polls I've been putting out to Twitter and reading your guys' responses, although there are frustrations for sure, you're not going to like every hero pool, there has been more positive feedback than negative. And I almost wonder, even those that are expressing negativity about it, once they get used to it, would they really enjoy being transported back to a world that doesn't have any limitations at all? As I know, a lot of players are enjoying the opportunity to mix up their gameplay, learn new heroes, and experience different types of matchups. Throughout this experience, realistically, it's just made me want strategic bans to be a thing eventually, seeing the benefit of the game dynamically changing rather than when it's easily solved. But that's also just an issue at the higher tiers where heroes and strategies are beginning to be maximized. Because if you haven't began to maximize your hero output, the meta doesn't exist. Jeff Kaplan is completely right in that regard. So it's a tricky situation. Jeff Kaplan brings up the barrier discussion again, which I thought was kind of interesting, and seems to question why a character like Reinhardt gets near universal praise among the community despite having a powerful barrier, and characters like Orisa and Sigma get scorned from players. Kind of some concerning quotes, honestly, since of course the answer is obvious to me. Reinhardt is very easy to interact with. He doesn't multitask with effective long range and a barrier which shuts out the enemy's range damage. He's all or nothing. You're afraid of him up close, but other than that, he's manageable, whereas Orisa and Sigma both have the potential benefits of blocking out range damage with a barrier, but also are effective at range themselves, which makes them less engaging to interact with. Like the rest of us, I think Jeff is happy with where the big barrier nerf era has put us, but also seems to be reluctant to add more barriers to the game, as he didn't say this directly, but they haven't necessarily worked all that well. Even asking the question, should barriers even be in the game? Well, obviously to some degree, but they also have to somehow consider making new tanks and seem to be realizing that adding more tanks that have barriers is going to be tough because we'll just come into contact with different versions of the multiple barrier metas that the big barrier nerfs were attempting to get rid of, seeming to imply that there's a chance that new tank heroes added to the cast won't have barriers. Does that mean we're getting Mauga, Jeff? Can you just give me Mauga? I like Mauga. I'd like to have Mauga now. Where's Mauga at? I see where he's going with these points, and I tend to agree that the game probably needs a minimal amount of damage mitigation to help out the teamwork aspects of the game. But, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently, potentially we'll make an entirely separate video about this, but I think to get people more interested in playing tank, they need more tanks that are interesting, that aren't just about helping the team, but can make plays. We need more Roadhog-esque type heroes that don't feel like a throw for the team for picking them. And based upon what Jeff has said in many recent statements over the past few months during this very transformative era of Overwatch, they are looking to move the game away from needing teamwork to be at the maximum degree all the time and toning that down a bit to allow for more individual expression in the game, which teamwork is still going to be massive no matter what, but it being the only thing is kind of what they're transitioning away from. And I think more fun but effective tank heroes that aren't just about protection is definitely the way to go. Sigma probably doesn't ruin the game if he didn't also have a barrier along with everything else, but maybe he needs one to be an effective tank. It's a tough trade-off, isn't it? Jeff also goes on to talk about toxicity in Overwatch and answers that really, it comes down to human nature, unfortunately. And when people talk about toxicity in the game, he does hesitate to say this, but he also does say it at the same time, that other games are far worse, and I totally agree with him. The Overwatch community is far kinder than other games, and it is going to fluctuate based on region and platform as well, but as a old gamer, kids these days don't know what went on in the olden days of Gears of War, Halo, and Call of Duty. Absolutely abhorrent behavior, and come to think of it, like half of the YouTube content back then was all about it. Whether it be trolling or getting people to rage or being rude to one another, it breeded toxicity up until the point where the game consoles really cracked down on that culture. And Overwatch being a generation past that, it's in a whole nother place. But at the same time, fighting toxicity isn't something that you ever can stop doing. Jeff does say that they're always looking for systems to help this. We've got LFG, endorsements, and what I think was easily the biggest buff to toxicity in the game was roll queue, and doesn't talk about any necessarily new systems that are going to come out to aid this, but implies that maybe there's some in the works, but ultimately states that with any luck, Overwatch 2 having a heavy PvE component might draw some of this away, as just everyone being in one bucket in the competitive gameplay sphere without an outlet can kind of bring out the worst in people. Whereas when there's all this extra content that puts you up against the computer, there's sort of a natural cooperative aspect to the gameplay, which I think tends to be correct because you see game communities that are PvE in nature, like Warframe, or the PvE aspects of Destiny or Diablo or what have you, where the game community is naturally cooperative because the actions you're taking in are cooperative in nature, whereas competitive games tend to raise the blood pressure, so to speak. Last point, Jeff does mention that he thinks that Overwatch is in the best state it's ever been, and I tend to agree with him. Now the game's all about Blizzard really stress testing their ideas so that everything is in order, PvP and all the new content as well, for when Overwatch 2 comes out, which seems to be ramping up for either later this year or very early next year if I had to guess. A beta for Overwatch 2 could come out literally at any point, honestly, depending on how long they want it to be. So I'll be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, that's been it for today's news roundup video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out. Let us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for Your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.